let there be no regrets. Let there be no regrets. Or at least let's do whatever we can to shed our regrets. And it's part of our human experience, having regrets. Thank God that we do, in essence, in a lot of ways, because it shows our hearts. It shows the depth of our caring, our human spirit, and that we regret things that we've done if we've harmed someone else, or we look back, particularly at midlife, and that's when regrets surface. Particularly, I think, because there's a natural tendency in midlife, and in midlife transition in particular, to look back over our lives and assess ourselves and reassess ourselves and get real with ourselves, as I've been saying. And so shedding regrets, shedding things that are past their use-by date is a great idea. It's a great idea at any time in life, but in midlife, it's an imperative, quite frankly. So the regrets that we carry. If only I had never got into that relationship in the first place. If only I didn't say those horrible words, it really wasn't me. How could I have said that to that person? If only I took that job that was offered me. How things would be different right now. Or if only, if onlys. How many if onlys do you have? It would be great exercise in itself, wouldn't it? To grab a pen and paper. Or that their digital device and write if only as a heading and see what flows out underneath that. So regrets, and regrets. Our regrets can ongoingly unsettle us. They can haunt us. They can make us stuck. They can add to our depression. Have us feeling real grief and shame, particularly if we wronged someone. We missed out on an opportunity that we feel was a good idea now. Now at least we think would have been a great idea. We missed it at the time. And they can come back at us at 4 a.m. in the morning. Don't know how many clients I've seen over the years. Hey Ash, I wake up wide awake all of a sudden at 4 a.m. in the morning, or round about that. And that can be for a lot of reasons, but one reason I'm sure is, in fact I know, is that these things that haunt us, they haunt our conscience. We behaved that was out of discord with our own character, that wasn't in integrity, particularly if we hurt someone right out of integrity, and it goes against our hearts, it goes against who we are as human beings. So naturally the voice of our conscience jacks up about that, and thank God it does. It causes inner upset, inner conflict and distress, and that's how it is. So we need to put it right in whatever way we can. So I've got some tips to share with you in this video, and steps that can assist you to feel freer from regrets and perhaps even banish them altogether. And just to say too that that what I'm saying in this video is not meant in any way or form to be therapy or counselling for you. What I'm sharing with you in this video are tips that I've learnt from working with a lot of people over the years, that are designed to lighten the load and to shed regrets a little or a whole lot if possible. So finish your unfinished business in whatever way you can. And I've mentioned already the consequence of carrying those regrets. So let's do what we can to move on. Tip number 1 is to open to an attitude that it's okay to let go of regret. And in my experience, we can only let go of regrets when we reconcile things within ourselves. And particularly if our regret was harming someone in some way, we need to make reparation or make amends in whatever way we can. And that's fundamental, as I've said, to our healing and our well-being, and really important. Tip number 2 is to give yourself permission to start the process. Because to let go of regrets means to face yourself and to make amends in some way. And that takes emotional maturity to do that, to really show up for yourself, to see yourself in an honest way. And a lot of us make all kinds of amazing excuses not to do that, not to take responsibility, which means we stay as children effectively in an emotional context. So growing up is hard to do, but now's a great time to start to take another step forward in that. If you need to, in terms of taking responsibility for yourself and showing up for your own healing and your own redemption and a new way forward for you, a free way forward, that's free of regret. If you need to take that choice and give yourself permission to start the process, I invite you to do that now. Tip number 3 is to keep a journal on this topic of regret. It's a place, it's a home to bring those regrets out of your psyche, out of your mind, out of the depths of your being, and get them out there on the page. It's an incredible step of reconciliation in and of itself. If you do that, I would, I was going to say bet London. I would bet London to a brick. That's an old saying. You may not know what that means, but I would guarantee that you would have profound insights in writing your regrets down in a book or a journal. Journal's the old-fashioned name for it. Great name. But giving them a home, letting yourself write, channeling those regrets out of you, giving them a place. You become more mindful, and as you write, you reappraise things, and things come into a new order, all on their own, really. You really bring a lot more awareness into them, and just that increased self-awareness is a really big deal in giving yourself more permission to deal with it and let them go and make whole new choices. Really profound. Tip number 4. Write a letter of truth to yourself only. So it's like a letter. Again, you can do that in the journal, that's enough. You may also write a letter to yourself of the absolute truth. It's kind of like letting your conscience do the writing, letting that wise inner voice in you write about that regret or about that situation, writing it on a letter. Then you might post that as an invitation to consider. You might post that letter to yourself, and then a couple of days later you receive it in the mail, and do that as a little experiment, like a little mindfulness-based experiment. Get that letter and open it up in a quiet place. Might be good to open up that letter when you're just by yourself and not with the family or your friends around, or that might create some consternation. Be a good conversation anyway to have. It would instill a great conversation, but such issues may be best left to you alone. Tip 5, release it. If you have, particularly if you've created your regret, if you put your key regret on a piece of paper of some description, you can have a symbolic way of letting that go. And our inner psyche, our unconscious, this is the kind of language that works really well with our unconscious. And doing such an act can really create a deep internal shift. Our logical mind really can't get its head around that, how that works, and doesn't see any rationale with it whatsoever. Perhaps sees it as some really childish or impotent kind of act. But it ain't. It really, if you do some ritual process with it, some symbolic act, that can really instigate an incredible shift. I've seen that happen in hundreds of people. And I've initiated it, helped initiate that for hundreds and hundreds of people in many groups, etc., that I've run. So for you, if your regret is on a piece of paper, you can burn that in some symbolic act. You could put it in some box and tape that box up and then put that box in the rubbish in a mindful way. Really put your heart into doing this. As I said, that can play a big part in creating a shift in you in terms of letting that regret go. Huge part. And I've seen some of the retreats, particularly I've run. I've seen people make enormous shifts that way, and I particularly remember the retreat where a man came on that retreat. He said to me at the start of the retreat, "Hey Ash, I haven't spoken to my son for years. I really need to work on that this weekend to make some shifts in that for me, because I really love him and I want to really have him back in my life and play a part for him." So he did that on this weekend that I ran, and he did claim his deepest regrets around that, and felt something really shift in himself on that weekend. When he got back from that weekend, there were three, but at least two messages from his son that his son had left on his answering machine at home. And I've seen that many times as well. When we make that inner shift, it does change us, and it does change other people. We are all interconnected, and such an exquisite example of that. The father shifted himself in such a legitimate, heartful way, and then that made a shift for his son in some deep inner way. And 2 or 3 messages left on his answering machine when the father got home from that weekend. Incredible, absolutely incredible. Tip number 6, reconcile your conscience, reconcile your spirit by making amends or recompense in some way. Some ideas to do that: write a letter to a person or make a phone call. If that has to do with self-harm, if you feel that you've harmed someone in some way. Can really consider that. That feels appropriate for you. Tip number 7, open to a higher spirit. If you have a belief, or better than a belief, an experience of God, sense of higher spirit, overmind, whatever that term is for you, praying, being with that spirit, and can be of profound support, and go ahead and embrace that frontier if that's real for you. Tip number 8, open your heart to serve a cause by taking your heart into the world in a new way. Regret is a wound of our hearts. I spoke a little bit about that earlier. And because we've done something against our core nature, our deepest human nature, in some ways, and of course I'm talking about that in the sense of regretting harming someone in the past, because it's a violation of our human spirit generally. So, to make recompense in some way, I have a question for you. How might you transform some mistake you made in the past into something that can uplift and even liberate people in some way? Tip number 8, open your heart to serve a cause by taking your heart into the world in a new way. This is a profound step in supporting ourselves to release regret and transform that regret into healing and well-being for ourselves and others. Really profound step to take in the context of regret that of some damage, hurt we've caused someone in the past. So regret is a wound of our hearts. I mentioned that somewhat earlier, because we've done something in that context that was against our core nature, against the human spirit in general, that naturally causes us great hurt and distress, and sets off this pattern of regret, which has to do with our spirit kind of calling to us essentially through the voice of our conscience, to do something about it, to heal ourselves, to make some recompense, and to transform it so we feel settled and established and connected again within ourselves. So I have a question for you. How might you transform some mistake you made in the past into something that can uplift and even liberate people in some way? I think that's a great question. I'm going to ask it to you again. How might you transform some mistake you made in the past into something that can uplift or even liberate people in some way? I remember William, who was a client that I coached, actually counselled. I had a past life as a counsellor and therapist. I don't do that anymore, but I did for a long time. And one client that I saw, a guy called William, he had done great emotional, great damage to to the people in his life that mattered most through his angry outbursts and shame and blame. And particularly he put that onto his children. And he was a great man because he was a great man because he really faced himself in that and took full responsibility, saw me as his counsellor for a time, attended a men's behaviour change group that I also ran at the time. And he really shifted himself, really first order transformation. Ended up training as a counsellor himself and taught non-violent communication to other men. I mean, profound, isn't that a juicy story? Isn't that a fantastic story? And I think hearing a story like that challenges all of us to see if we can do something. If not a whole lot like that, a little bit. Head in that terrain. If we've made some hurt happen to someone else, how can we transform that into some positive? And as a way of healing, I think there's nothing more that our psyche, our spirit would want from that experience. These are the kind of acts we need to do, I think, in the world now to make any shift real possible. In the world, there's a lot of issues happening in the world that are really problematic, to say the least. So if we can play our own part to transform something within ourselves, to bring life and joy and a real difference, then let's play our part. So associated with this sense of bringing your heart into the world in a new way, within a different context, is making a difference in the community in some way, the local community or the global community. You might give someone hope who has none, mentor someone. You've got great skills in the particular areas that you work in or how you've lived your life. Apply them to someone else to help someone else, or volunteer for some charity or other society in the community. Various ways that we can contribute. So I'm going to ask you a question now, that because if you're now noticing that there's several regrets, or you have a lot of regrets that you feel you want to work with, you might feel overwhelmed with regret and thereby regretting that you ever put this video on in the first place. No, I'm joking in that. Hopefully I am joking in that. So this question I'd like to ask you. So if there was just one regret, that if you were to let it go, would really lighten the load for you and free you up to feel a whole lot better about yourself, what would that one regret be? So if there was one regret that if you were to let it go would really lighten the load for you, would really free you up, what would that one regret be? And then the next question that's very much associated with that first one is, what would assist you to let that go? And that may be some professional person, it may be a counsellor or a therapist or or following those steps that we did a little bit earlier, one of those steps. Share with you a couple of further client stories here. Pauline regretted ever taking up smoking, and she found just working with the journal was just something that gave her a context and a get realness that really supported her to finally make that journey out of self-recrimination into the conviction to actually let it go. And Damien wrote a letter of apology to a friend that he had wronged years ago, and invited the friend to get in contact with him, or actually asked him to get in contact with him, and that began a process of reconnection and reconciliation and healing for both people. So as I mentioned, some professional help is a great idea to help us move on if we need that. If we feel stuck or in distress, I really counsel you to do that. We invite you to do that. So I'll complete this video with some tips as to how you can do things differently to not create so much regret. Thinking more before you act or speak is a great tip. It would have to be tip number one, wouldn't it really? An essential guideline for that is to categorically delete shame, blame, put down statements when you're communicating with other people, no adverse criticism. And it's kind of a no-brainer really, isn't it? But so many of us struggle with that. We particularly when a parent spoke to us in a shaming, blaming, put down, judgmental way, our psyche just kind of carries that forward as a natural for it in terms of our unconscious habit. We kind of naturally can say naturally, I don't want to use that word. We can find ourselves falling into that old pattern, that old style of communicating, and boy, does it do damage, just incredible damage. And deleting that completely from your style of communication to other people, absolutely. And if you need, and please get whatever help you need to do that. See a really good counsellor that knows about these things and work on that if you have that habit. Please do. Take whatever time and the next tip is to take whatever time you need, particularly when you're making one of life's big decisions. So to really assess that well, sort that out well. Take whatever time you need, so you don't come back on yourself in the future and say, well, I was too hasty in that. I shouldn't have done that. I was just too hasty. I didn't assess all my options. Ask yourself the question when in doubt, how do I really feel about what I'm going to do? How do I really feel about the actions I'm going to take? How do I really feel about how I'm going to talk to my son about this issue? Just run that through your mind. Particularly if you know you can do some damage, stop and pause and reflect and walk around the house or walk around the block, go for a walk in the park, whatever you need to do. Settle yourself down so that when you communicate what you need to communicate to someone, you're in as clear and stable a place as you can be to deliver that in the best possible way. And if any issues were brought up to you, brought up for you in this video, is something you find unsettling, get a hold of a counsellor, get a hold of a professional in some way, or and really please alleviate that in an appropriate way. It's really important. As I said, I've been a professional in this area in the past in terms of counselling and psychotherapy, and certainly got a lot of assistance myself in terms of counselling and psychotherapy, but on a personal level and as part of my training and supervision in those early years. So a really important thing to do is to get whatever support we need when we need it, so we can really move on, get unstuck and really move on in our lives. And that way we don't waste days, we don't waste years, and we don't waste decades of our lives, or the whole of our life getting stuck in something that we don't need to. So thanks for being with me in this video. I hope you've got something uplifting out of it, something you can make a difference in your own life, and perhaps make a difference in the world in which you live. Check me out at ashandrews.com for the latest vlogs and or other online courses I might offer there, and make sure you're on the mailing list so I can inform you when new blogs, etc. postings occur. Thanks for joining me. Good luck. Farewell for now.